You're parked on a secluded dirt road on a crisp California night. The radio is playing softly. A car pulls up behind you, and the headlights cut out. A figure approaches. Before you can make out a face, a blinding beam of light hits your eyes, followed by the barrel of a 9mm handgun. On December 20th, 1968, high school students David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen were parked on a gravel turnout on Lake Herman Road. Within 3 minutes of their attacker arriving, David was shot in the head. Betty Lou was shot 5 times in the back as she tried to run for her life. When police arrived, they found bodies, but virtually nothing else. There were no witnesses. The gravel road meant there were no usable tire tracks or footprints. The victims had not been robbed, and there was no obvious motive. The killer left the couple's valuables untouched. This was a targeted hunt for human beings. As the news spread, families began locking doors that had stayed open for generations, and the quiet roads of the Bay Area were treated as potential killing fields. 7 months later, the killer sent nearly identical handwritten letters to the Vallejo Times, the San Francisco Examiner, and the San Francisco Chronicle. He demanded the papers print his words on the front page. If they refused, he promised to cruise the streets and kill a dozen people over the weekend. He went beyond simply confessing to the murders. He branded himself. He began signing his notes with a crossed circle symbol and introduced his demands with the phrase, "This is the Zodiac speaking." In later letters, he threatened to shoot out the tires of a school bus and pick off the children as they bounced out. The threat forced police to put armed guards on school buses. Parents across the state kept their kids indoors in a panic. The killer had effectively paralyzed entire communities with a few sheets of paper. His 9mm pistol was only a secondary weapon. By feeding his threats directly to the press, the Zodiac turned a string of local homicides into a statewide campaign of domestic terrorism. Alongside his demands, the killer mailed complex cryptograms. He told authorities that if they could crack the codes, they would find his true identity hidden inside. This visual diagram breaks down his first code, a 408-symbol grid. It was cracked within days by a local school teacher and his wife. It contained no name. Instead, it revealed a twisted obsession. The translation read, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. Man is the most dangerous animal of all." He claimed he was collecting souls to be his slaves in the afterlife. Law enforcement had solved his first puzzle, so he escalated. He sent a new, denser 340-character cipher. This code used a different cryptographic structure, employing a transposition system that shuffled the message before it was encoded. It baffled the FBI, the CIA, and the world's top cryptographers for over 5 decades. These codes exposed his true motive. Authorities were hunting a megalomaniac playing an elaborate, deadly game to prove his intellectual superiority over the police. While the suspect pool swelled into the thousands, the killer abruptly changed his methods. He stopped targeting couples in dark, secluded areas and brutally attacked 2 college students in broad daylight at a public recreation area. Then he shifted environments completely. He hailed a cab in downtown San Francisco, directed the driver to a wealthy, quiet neighborhood, shot him in the back of the head, wiped down the cab, and casually walked away into the night. Amidst thousands of dead ends, one man stood out, Arthur Lee Allen. He lived incredibly close to the Vallejo victims. He had allegedly told a friend he wanted to hunt humans and call himself Zodiac. He even wore a watch made by a brand called Zodiac, which featured the exact crossed circle logo the killer used to sign his letters. But the investigation hit a brick wall. The killer had left partial fingerprints on the cab and handwritten letters with the newspaper. Allen's prints and handwriting never matched the physical evidence. That is the agonizing reality of this cold case. Detectives found a man who perfectly fit the psychological profile, but they lacked the definitive forensic science to close the trap. Decades later, modern technology offered a new thread to pull. Investigators realized the Zodiac had to lick his stamps and envelopes to send his taunting letters, leaving behind saliva. They attempted to extract touch DNA from the evidence. The lab successfully pulled a partial genetic profile. They compared it to Arthur Lee Allen, officially ruling him out. But when they ran the profile through public databases, they failed to find a match to anyone else. Without a DNA hit, we are left looking at how he escaped in the first place. In 1969, neighboring county police departments rarely communicated or shared files. Combine that fractured system with a killer who constantly changed his weapon and location, and he became nearly impossible to track. The media frenzy also worked perfectly to his advantage. Thousands of hoax letters and false confessions flooded police stations, burying the genuine evidence under a mountain of noise. The Zodiac's survival was aided by systemic failure. In 1969, the fractured justice system lacked the communication and technology to track a mobile killer who refused to stay within a single jurisdiction. If the Zodiac was in his late 20s or 30s during the murders, he would be well into his 80s or 90s today. Mathematically, it is entirely possible he is still alive. He could be living quietly in a nursing home, watching documentaries about his own crimes, secure in the knowledge that he beat the system. But the case isn't dead. In 2020, the infamous Z340 cipher, which stumped the FBI for half a century, was finally cracked. Civilian codebreakers built custom software running over 650,000 solutions until the algorithm locked on to the plain text translation. This breakthrough proves that time is no longer a shield for cold cases. With fresh eyes, modern supercomputers, and the advancing science of genetic genealogy, evidence from half a century ago can still yield explosive results. The monster may have retreated into the shadows, but the technological net is closing around him. We are left with one final question. Did the Zodiac really stop killing, or did he just stop telling us?